Okay, so today's deep dive, it's about as timely as it gets. We are diving into, like head first, into this Verizon outage, the one that's been causing a whole bunch of chaos all over the U.S. this morning. Imagine it's Monday morning, right? You grab your phone, first thing, check those work emails, maybe sneak a peek at social media, and bam, nothing. Just that dreaded no service message staring back at you.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah, you're not wrong about the timing on this one. It's definitely got everyone talking.
For sure. So we've got a ton of articles here, CBS, Tech Radar, CRN, you name it. We're going to break it all down, figure out what exactly went wrong, how Verizon is handling it, and maybe even more importantly, what this whole thing says about, well, how much we depend on staying connected in this day and age.
And you know what's really interesting about this whole thing? It isn't like just a couple people complaining about a dropped call here and there. We are talking major, widespread disruption. By mid-morning, Down Detector was like lit up like a Christmas tree. Over 100,000 user reports.
Wow, 100,000.
No joke. And where were these outage hotspots, you ask? Concentrated right there on the East Coast. They've got this heat map, and honestly, it looks like someone just dumped a can of red paint all over the whole eastern seaboard.
Yes, not a pretty picture for sure.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just like slow internet or a few drop calls, right? We are talking about a full-on digital blackout for a ton of people. Some of the articles even mention people getting stuck in, get this, SOS mode.
Oh no, SOS mode? You're kidding.
I wish I was. Now, for those of you lucky enough to have never experienced that particular kind of joy, SOS mode. It basically takes your smartphone, all the bells and whistles, poof, gone. Turns it back into like one of those old school walkie-talkies.
2 tin cans and a string.
Exactly. Yeah, make emergency calls if you absolutely have to, but that's about it.
So much for ordering that morning coffee or scrolling through those TikToks.
Tell me about it. And yeah, the articles actually mentioned some specific cities that were hit especially hard. Birmingham, Montgomery, Fayetteville. It's like a huge chunk of the country got zapped back to the Stone Age, technologically speaking at least.
And, oh man, you can practically feel the frustration radiating from some of the social media posts they quoted. People relying on GPS for their morning commute suddenly are lost. Important work deadlines missed. Unable to check in with family. Stress levels through the roof. It just goes to show you, our phones are practically glued to us these days. And when that connection gets cut off so abruptly, well, it's like someone hit the panic button on modern life.
Just like having the digital rug yanked out from under you.
It's definitely what you'd call a carefully crafted statement, that emphasis on speed. They want to reassure their customers that they're on top of it, taking it super seriously. But here's the thing. They don't say a single word about what actually caused this whole massive outage in the first place.
And that lack of transparency, that can actually make people even more anxious.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a magician saying, don't worry, folks, I'm working quickly to figure out where that rabbit went, but never actually explaining how it disappeared.
Exactly. And what's even more interesting? There's one thing they haven't even touched on. What about the impact on businesses? I mean, were their business services affected too? Did companies get hit with the same disruptions? The articles are totally silent on that front, and that silence speaks volumes if you ask me.
Right. Are they still trying to figure out just how big this thing really is? Or are they strategically just focusing on individual customers for right now? It's definitely something to think about.
No doubt. And you know what else this highlights? This Verizon outage. It's not exactly an isolated incident. Remember that AT&T outage earlier this year? I think it was February.
February, yeah. Tens of thousands of users affected, major cities across the U.S. Basically the same story. Widespread disruption, and people tearing their hair out.
Yep. And it's not just telecom companies either. Remember when Amazon Web Services went down? Talk about a nightmare. Think about all those poor folks stuck in line at Whole Foods because the checkout system crashed.
Oh, I remember that. I was one of them. Not fun.
Or how about when CrowdStrike, the big cybersecurity firm, had that major outage?
It really does feel like these big outages are becoming more and more common these days. Even the tech giants aren't immune,
It's true. And it makes you realize how vulnerable we are when the internet's down, right?
Yeah.
Think about it. Everything from online banking to, heck, even ordering groceries. It all depends on a stable internet connection.
Yeah.
One of these articles even talked about how some people couldn't even access things because of two-factor authentication being down.
Yeah, good old two-factor authentication. That extra layer of security where you need a code from your phone to get into your bank account or your email.
That thing.
Well, that whole system goes kaput when your phone's basically a brick because the network's down.
Talk about being locked out of your own life. And speaking of security, you brought up a really good point earlier about these outages potentially causing cybersecurity risks.
Oh, absolutely. When these systems crash, those little digital cracks, they become open doors for, well, let's just say the bad guys, right? Think about it. It's like leaving the back door to your house wide open during a blackout. You're just asking for trouble. Suddenly, you're way more vulnerable to all sorts of nasty stuff, data breaches, phishing scams, you name it.
So not only are you stuck dealing with the frustration of not even being able to use your phone, but you also got to worry about someone cleaning out your bank account while it's down.
Exactly. Double whammy. That's why it's more important now than ever to make sure you've got strong passwords, right? Be really careful about any emails or links that look even a little bit sketchy. And think about setting up extra security measures, just in case.
It's like they say, better safe than sorry.
Always. And, on a bigger scale, these outages, they really expose how fragile or, what's the word, critical infrastructure can be. It's like, shouldn't there be some kind of backup plan? Redundancy in the system, better ways to communicate when something like this happens.
Right. I mean, it's easy to get mad and want to chuck your phone across the room when you see that little spinning wheel of doom. But maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
these outages can teach us a thing or two.
I like the way you think. Instead of complaining about how everything's falling apart, maybe we should be asking, well, how do we adapt to this?
Exactly. Are we getting smarter about how we use technology?
Mhm.
Are we paying more attention to those potential problems lurking around the corner?
Mm.
Or are we just throwing our hands up and saying, well, that's just how it is these days? Like it's just a normal Tuesday when the internet crashes and burns.
Right. And even more importantly, what can we do to be ready for that next inevitable outage? I mean, should we be dusting off those old board games, just in case the Wi-Fi goes out again, maybe finally figure out how to use that emergency crank radio we all have stashed away somewhere?
Not a bad idea.
But it goes beyond just us, right? It's a wake-up call for the people running these companies, the policymakers, everyone, really. We need to create systems that are more resilient, they can bounce back from these kinds of things.
It really makes you think, we're so used to everything running smoothly. Then bam, a couple of wires get crossed somewhere.
Mm.
And suddenly it's like the whole world's gone haywire. Who would have thought our morning coffee could be held hostage by a computer glitch?
It's true, isn't it? We rely on technology for pretty much everything these days, but that makes us vulnerable in ways we don't always realize. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom, right? I mean, these disruptions, yeah, they're a pain, but they can also be opportunities. We can learn from them, maybe even come out stronger on the other side.
I like your optimism. So instead of complaining about how fragile it all is, maybe the question should be, how do we adapt?
Exactly. Are we getting smarter about how we use technology, more aware of the potential problems, or are we just accepting these outages as, I don't know, the new normal? Like it's just a typical Tuesday when the internet crashes and burns.
And maybe an even bigger question. What can we actually do to be ready for the next time this happens? Because let's face it, it's going to happen again.
But it's bigger than just us being prepared, right? This should be a wake-up call for those big companies, for the people making the rules. We need to start building more resilient systems, things that can bounce back from these kinds of disruptions.
Right. Like they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Maybe, just maybe, all these frustrating outages will eventually lead to a better, more reliable future.
Fingers crossed, right?
We can hope. But in the meantime, it's on us to be aware, be prepared, and push for a digital world that can handle those bumps in the road. Well said. And on that note, a big thank you to you, our ever-curious listeners, for joining us for this particularly timely deep dive. We hope this episode gave you a lot to think about, not just about the Verizon outage, but about our increasingly interconnected world. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and hey, maybe keep a backup charger handy. You never know when you might need it.